Welcome to our webinar, Gain Maximum ROI from Agile. My name is Rachel Abrams. I'm just going to go over a few logistics before we get started. We will have time at the end of the webinar for Q&A, so please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your Zoom panel, and we will also be sending out the webinar recording in the next day or so, so if you have to drop or would like to share it with others, you'll be able to do that. And now I will pass it over to David and Sumedha.
Hi, folks. My name is David Pointer. I'm an Agile coach for Agile Velocity. I have been coaching and been in the Agile space for almost 22 years. I started this back at AOL a long time ago and have never left. It's been one of my favorite journeys, just be able to help people and help organizations do better.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sumedha Ganjoo. I am the head of products for Path to Agility Navigator, which is a software offering which helps you measure agility for your company and how you're progressing, your agile maturity. Based out of Austin, Texas. My background is in product management, software engineering, and entrepreneurship. I have worked in the smallest of startups for like 3 people, 4 people, all the way to global corporates, which are over 10,000 employees in various roles. And here we're both, and we would love to hear from you too. By the way, there's a chat function. You're welcome to share in chat. Where are you located? We would love to know, who are we speaking to today? I'll continue while I see your responses come in. So we're here representing Agile Velocity. We are a group of Agile experts like David, product experts like me, who are really passionate about helping companies and teams achieve true agility. And we do this through services, we do this through workshops, and we do this through software offering, as I was mentioning before. We've developed a proprietary method, Path to Agility, that David can tell you more about.
Path to Agility is our trademark approach to transformations and working with organizations. It's a proven approach, and the great thing about Path to Agility is we focus on things like business outcomes. Instead of trying to solve or transform the entire organization, let's focus on the things that really matter to move the needle. It also has improved transformation management processes in it, so that way we can track the measurement of the transformation and focus on the real important problems. It also enables really continuous improvement, so that way we can have a backlog of areas to focus and what are the things that are going to make the biggest difference to the organization. And it also provides real-time visual visualization of the progress, so that way you can see how you're doing and where you're improving.
So as David mentioned, we have Path to Agility. We have a group of Agile experts. These experts have worked with companies across the globe, hundreds of companies, helping them transform, drive agility, improve their agility. And over, we have seen there are key trends, formula for success, that when executed well, they truly achieve agility, or they see real benefit and ROI of agility. So we wanted to call out some of those themes that we've observed over time by working with so many companies. First and foremost, focus on business outcomes. Actually using business outcomes to communicate the why and the intent behind why are we truly trying to transform as a company, not just doing Agile for the sake of Agile, but connecting the dots to what is the business outcome we're trying to achieve as a company. Secondly, leaders leading the change, not just, hey teams, go transform yourself, become the best version of the Agile team that you can see out there, but leaders truly adopting the Agile mindset and being involved in that transformation. Then I can't stress on this enough, changing the mindset. It's not just about doing the activities, but putting in effort and embracing the mindset change that comes from focusing on customer value, focusing on product, versus more traditional ways of doing things, which are very project driven. Maybe you've seen this before, where you have a scoped project, budget comes in, people come in and out, and the knowledge gets lost over time. When you shift to a product mindset or a value-driven mindset, you're building knowledge, you're building skills that over time help the teams truly stay focused on building and supporting the product over time and stay focused on the customer value. Managing the change journey, we've seen some companies execute on that really well, actually put in focus on communication, on how do you manage change and not just assume that the change will manage itself by just doing the right activities. Involving the whole organization and not just focusing on R&D or technology or just even teams for transformation, but involving finance, involving HR, involving marketing, involving the entire business to truly become agile. And last but not the least, the companies that succeed also focus on building internal coaching capacity. It's not a one and done thing. They're actually building expertise internally so that this transformation becomes a continuous improvement process. And as things change, it is sustainable, not just in pockets within the team or the company, but standardized across the entire company. David, I'm curious, which of these would you say is your favorite or like the one that you've seen most commonly?
I think the most common is number 4, just the lack of business engagement. The idea that most transformations start from IT, and if IT does not bring in business, or if they do bring in business, the idea of alignment there has a really powerful effect on the ability to be able to make the transformation successful.
Absolutely, I would agree.
All right. Let's talk about some reasons why transformations might fail. So there's several areas that we want to cover. First is implementing the practices over outcomes. The idea is focusing on the outcome that you want to achieve instead of just focusing on the agile practices. What are the goals that you're trying, or the issues or opportunities you're trying to address to be able to make sure that you are hitting the mark? A lot of companies don't do this, and what ends up happening is that their agile transformation stalls and ends up not going anywhere. Focusing on the team level. This is a great one because a lot of organizations will start a bunch of teams, and those teams will start doing their agile stuff and developing hardware or developing software, but the rest of the company doesn't change. So it makes it a lot harder for those teams to actually do their job because they're not getting the things in the way that they are expecting. Number 3, training without coaches. If you don't bring in outside expertise or some sort of expertise into your organization to help drive this transformation, you're going to make a lot of the mistakes that other companies have already made. So having people who have expertise in this area to be able to come in and help guide you through this is a great approach to be able to ensure that you're not wasting time, money, and also getting the efficiencies you want out of what you're trying to do. Number 4, this is one we already mentioned, the lack of business engagement. If IT starts a transformation but does not utilize or bring in business to understand the why and understand the reasons behind this, what you end up getting is 2 different mindsets talking to each other in different languages, so that way they can't really understand. And there's a lot of translation that has to go on between those 2 groups, and it ends up causing a lot of churn within the organization. And then also not optimizing across the entire value stream. If you're not looking at your value streams and focusing on how you're setting those up so that way your teams are highly focused and highly organized around that product, you're not going to get the value out of this. Because again, teams that support a product fully and continuously will develop skills and experience and knowledge around that product that will help you transform it and make it even stronger later. So now we're going to talk, I'll turn it over to Sumedha.
Absolutely. I was just going to add that I would love to hear from people on which of if David, you could go back to the previous slide.
Oh, yes, we need to do the poll.
Yeah, which of those challenges or pitfalls, transformations, fails have they seen? David, the previous slide, please.
Sorry, it's not going back.
We only know how to go forward. Can't go back. That's progress.
There you go.
Great. All right. So you should see a poll launch. It's asking you, which of these have you encountered? We would love to hear from you. Which of these have you encountered? And I will wait for a few minutes before we share the results back. I see some votes coming in. Interesting. right? We'll give it a few more seconds, maybe another 15 to 20 seconds. We have a few more people who could participate. Looks like 60% of you participated, so that's great. All right. Let's end the poll and see the results. You should all be able to see the results on your screens as well. It looks like 50% of you have seen focus on only the team level. 60% have seen lack of business engagement, very common. But then votes are scattered across all, like implementing practices over outcome, training without coaching, not optimizing across the entire value stream. So y'all have seen transformations fail because of these kinds of challenges. Thank you all for sharing. David, do you want to add anything to that before I stop sharing?
No, I think that's great, because these are very common things that organizations are challenged with. And the idea that if you don't bring in people with knowledge to be able to make sure you miss these pitfalls, you are going to face these challenges. So you have to be able to be ready for this, because a lot of times organizations enter transformations and they don't understand exactly what they're asking for, because it is a big change and it's not something that can be done overnight. It is a journey and it takes time. So you need to be able to plan for how you're going to do that to be able to get the best results out of it.
Absolutely. Now, speaking of the success criteria, transformation failures, let's talk about some challenges that in real time we've seen people encounter. Maybe you all are encountering some of these challenges. We would love for you to just post in chat, or if you have any questions, please feel free to use Q&A. We're monitoring that. We'll answer. We'll definitely take some time for Q&A at the end, but you're welcome to post questions as we go as well. So one of the challenges that we have seen transformation leaders or people driving agility run into is the separation between business and technology functions. It's almost like they're speaking two different languages and they need an interpreter, which is an overhead, but also lots of chances of miscommunication. Now, most agile transformations we have seen start in technology or IT, where they're actually trying to drive the agile transformation instead of having the clear focus on the business outcome and the business driving the agile transformation. That is not setting the business up or the customers up for success. There's multiple ways that can fail. Think about it. IT or R&D might not fully understand the business and the customer constraints. On the other hand, if the business doesn't understand how IT is working, the agility that they work with, they might be communicating timelines, they might be making commitments, which really they're doing that without full alignment with IT or R&D. So it is one of the challenges that we have seen a lot of transformation leaders, transformations encounter by having these two as separate functions. David, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think you covered everything. It's just very interesting because, again, usually it's IT trying to figure out how to meet the needs of business that they actually engage in an agile transformation because they think it's going to speed up the delivery. But if you don't involve the entire organization, what will happen is, just like Sumedha said, you have two different people talking two different languages, and they have to figure out how to translate that properly and get the benefit out of it. But if you don't transform business as well and the way that they function, you are going to have a lot of problems trying to get to a real agile advantage.
That's a really good point, David. I want to reinforce that. It's because I have seen this happen where millions of dollars are spent on evolving the technology function. And yes, that is, I would not say that wasn't beneficial. There were definite improvements in productivity, in delivery that we're seeing, but the business never got the true ROI that they could have gotten because the business wasn't involved. So the maximum benefit wasn't achieved in a true way.
Absolutely. So another challenge is, this is one I've seen a lot. When when an organizations will set up agile teams, but the business does not change the way that they function. So what you end up is having teams that are trying to do agile, and they're really trying to be able to take advantage of that of the framework. But then you have the rest of the organization operating still in a waterfall manner. They're asking for project plans. Where are my status reports? Where are those things that I normally use to operate on? And that causes a lot of problems, because then you have teams who are basically doing double duty. They're trying to do this new agile stuff, but then they're also having to do the old stuff that the organization used to do, because people in business don't want to change the way that they do things. Moving their cheese can cause a lot of problems, but you have to plan for that, so that way the organization can align and be speaking the same language throughout the entire journey. Sumedha, do you want anything on that?
No, but would love to hear from individuals on if they are having to do status reports through the poll.
Yes. Are you sharing that poll?
I can.
Please,
So we
I cannot actually, for some reason it's giving me the other one.
all good. So we would love to hear from you. How many of you still have to do status reports while working in what is considered an agile organization, and have Scrum teams or agile teams? We're seeing some answers come in. Let's wait for a few more responses. So I'm gonna end the poll and share the results.
Wow. That's a good cut. I'm not surprised. Yeah, and this is one of the wonderful things, because I hear even in current organizations that I work at, you hear project managers and scrum masters saying the same thing, or you have project managers and product owners. Oh, I got to do my status report. Why are you doing a status report when you have events in Agile that those folks could come to understand exactly where you are, and you can provide that context, or whatever tool you're using to track your progress? Why can't they just go in there and look and see where things are, instead of you spending time creating a status report? It seems to be just a old, archaic part of waterfall that just keeps hanging around, and we just can't get rid of it.
I see a question has come in from Michael, and how have we seen the waterfall versus agile issue addressed successfully? Michael, we are going to speak to some of the solutions that we have seen companies execute. And if we haven't answered your question through that, we'll ask you again at the end in the time of Q&A to make sure that we answer anything else that is remaining from that.
Absolutely. So moving on to the next challenge that we've seen, this is always a big one, because the finances and the budgeting of any organization has an impact on the entire organization. And one of the things that we've seen is when organizations are still budgeting in a waterfall process, where they're doing big upfront planning for an entire year, so they're making decisions without IT involvement usually. So what ends up happening is they're making commitments, but they have not worked with or talked to the agile part of the organization, the teams, to see if they could actually deliver what they're actually committing to. Because again, the complexities of understanding what they're delivering, the solutioning, how big it is, all those things are going to have an impact on the ability of the teams to deliver that. So if you don't have the alignment between business and IT and the idea of this financial budgeting process, then what ends up happening is you're overcommitted. You're going to have to spend a lot more money hiring probably more teams and throw bodies at it just to be able to make it work. So you have to be able to align how you're deciding making your strategic decisions with the ability of IT to be able to match those decisions. So you have to have alignment between business and IT in the way that you're doing that, so that way you can actually deliver on what you're committing to. All right. The next one we want to talk about, this is one that we saw in the poll. This happens a lot. Organizations think they're agile because they've set up a bunch of agile teams, and we're agile because we have a bunch of agile teams. If those teams are functioning in an agile way and the rest of the organization is not, you're doing them a disservice, because they do not get the benefit, the full benefit of agile, because the rest of the organization is still doing the same things they've done the entire time. And what that does is put more burden on the teams. It also makes them have to work harder. Burnout is a big problem. And also the ability for them to deliver and focus on IT horizontal or local things goes out the window, because they don't have the ability to promote the importance of either technical debt or operationalizing things. And if without that, you're going to have things that are going to either catch on fire or things that are going to break, because they're not focused on that stuff as well. And business doesn't understand that. So it has to be a learning process with teaching business what IT is capable of and their capacity for doing that. Without that, you're going to be making commitments that the development teams cannot deliver on. So this is a big problem with a lot of organizations. So you have to build the mindset around the leadership and the organization to be able to deliver as well in an agile way.
Let's talk about change management again. So again, something that's I've seen for granted a lot of times, something new and shiny. People get excited, people get involved, and then over time, teams, individuals get fatigued. What's the next new shiny thing? Either they don't see enough progress over time, or they truly don't understand the why behind things. So they kind of give up. This is a real challenge, and if not managed well, will lead to getting stuck within an agile transformation journey and not truly improving. So change management into different parts. It is first and foremost aligning on the why, understanding and communicating, going back to the business outcome, the intent, whether the intent is internal, like employee engagement and improving how we're doing things, or whether the intent is external, like customer satisfaction or market responsiveness. Aligning and communicating that why is the key. Then second piece of that change management is constant communication of progress. Do not assume that it's happening means people know that it's happening. Everybody has their day-to-day, people are busy. You have to nowadays repeat things. I've heard statistics like 42 times for people to remember something. Attention spans are reducing. So constant communication of the progress. And then the third piece of change management, it's not a one-way communication. Active listening is a really big part of it. Hear the teams out. We had ideas on what change would look like, but then how did that actually play out? What feedback do individuals have? Having ears and channels across the entire organization to truly understand how is the change impacting people, and making iterative improvements to that is a key piece of change management as well. And companies that execute on that well do a really good job with their agility and agile transformation, but then also we see a lot of companies not focus on this and take this for granted.
And you said one thing that was really important, the feedback loops, being able to set up internal feedback loops so people at the ground level all the way up to the leadership can provide that feedback, so that way they feel empowered, that they're actually able to lean in and become a champion for your change, is also a critical thing, because if people feel like they're just a cog in the wheel, they won't participate. So the more communication you have, the more you can involve everybody, the better your transformation will go.
Absolutely. Now the next one is my favorite, which means my least favorite of the challenges, which is there's a big difference between leaders walking the walk and talking the talk. Right? Leaders that don't truly understand or embrace agile mindset create resistance throughout the process. They might approve the project, whether it's under pressure, whether it's because everybody's doing it, whether it's because somebody convinced them, but they're still in their hearts stuck in the old ways of doing things. which makes it really difficult for Agile transformation leaders, for teams, for champions to truly continue making progress over time. They fatigue out. It also leads to lack of psychological safety. That is a fundamental challenge that is a make or break for any organization. Like, think about it. Continuous improvement, by definition, involves learning. Learning, by definition, involves failure. If your team's employees are not allowed to fail, are scared to fail, are scared to communicate honestly what's going on or their learnings, the scope for learning and continuous improvement drastically reduced. I've seen this play out, for example, like a simple example. Teams have adopted the Scrum mentality. They're tracking velocity because they want to get better at estimating what can they do in the next sprint. What should they commit to? Now, somehow these velocity burn-ups, burn-downs make it to leadership. Now, leadership is looking at velocity charts. I've seen this play out like across multiple teams, and they start comparing velocity. Why is this team doing more? Why is this team doing less? Instead of truly understanding that velocity is a subjective metric, and the goal of velocity is to help the team, now they're using it as an objective metric of productivity, which is not what it is. And this is where then teams start fudging numbers. They try to add buffers. They try to make it look different. And the entire transformation gets derailed. But that's an example where it's really important for the leaders to be educated, to understand what does it mean to have an Agile mindset at a high level, but also trickle down at a lower level. Anything you want to add to this, David?
Yeah, I can't stress enough, leaders need to be more people leaders than people managers. And the idea that they stay in that same realm and try to fit into an Agile framework does not always work. They need to be more support structure than they are that management structure, so that they can help guide and support the teams instead of lead and manage the teams. Because again, the teams know what they need. They're the experts. What they need is cover fire and shielding from all the distractions so they can get work done. So leaders need to become more of that change agent to be able to promote better efficiency out of their teams.
Absolutely.
All right. Now, this is a very interesting one. One of the things that we always get asked is, how do we know the transformation is successful? How do we know that the money that these organizations are spending on an Agile transformation is actually valuable? And we get asked this question, how do we know? And this is something that can be very hard to do, because again, how do you measure the success of something so large and complex? There's plenty of ways to do it, and we'll talk about some later when we talk about some of the solutions that we have for some of these common problems. But the idea around this is that you need to be able to develop a plan with the leadership of the organization before you start on how you're going to measure that success. This can be in many different ways. There's many different options for this, but the idea is that being able to have some sort of measurement so you can show, here's how we've moved the needle, is going to be important to the ability for the long-term success of the transformation. Now, one of the interesting things that we have seen is as organizations go through their change curve or their satir curve into the change of the transformation, one of the things that happens is they get stuck in this valley of despair. And this is because they go through a lot of change, and organizations sometimes try to change too much at one time. They're not focused on just a specific area of change. They're trying to change everything. And what ends up happening, it causes a lot of chaos. There's a bunch of resistance because people don't like change. And then trying to integrate that and actually make it part of your DNA becomes really difficult. So this is where a lot of organizations end up. Yes, we have lots of Agile teams, but we're not fully invested or getting the full value out of this new framework because we're not embracing the full advantages of it. So then these other areas we don't end up getting into. And it's very difficult for organizations. They end up in this one spot and they seem to be stuck because they can't address those big, huge rocks they have, like the budgeting process, or getting management to operate more as a support structure than a managing structure.
To what David spoke to. Basically, we did a survey for over 500 organizations to kind of see. We defined it that way. That's what our experience has told, as David said, that companies get stuck in that abyss of transformation. But this is, how do they perceive themselves? So this is what the answers were. 29% of them would agree that they feel they have implemented agility superficially. 51% would say they are in that, we're improving things, everything is getting better, but really have not come to the other side of that abyss, which is predictability and faster agility. Only 3% identified themselves as truly agile and saying that we have achieved what we would call like business agility, where you have adaptability in the business as well, and not just a faster, predictable IT or R&D organization. This is how organizations have rated themselves, and it kind of matches what we have seen over and over when we work with different companies.
So let's talk about some solutions that we want to show you for some of the challenges we just talked about. This is one of those things. The idea that when you actually start a transformation, it's not about just the teams. You have to understand that there's leaders that are from all parts of the organization that are going to participate in this transformation, or at least have a tangential impact on that. You need to evaluate your entire organization. You need to be able to look at both the team level, of course. You need to understand how your teams are doing, but you also need to look at your system and your organizational level. If you don't look at all these different levels, what you end up with is you're going to end up in some of the areas that we talked about as challenges. The idea that you have a bunch of agile teams, but the rest of the organization doesn't change. You need to get leadership involved in your transformation, and they need to be an integral part to that transformation, because if they don't, then you're going to have it's going to be from the ground up, and then nothing, it's only going to change on the ground. You need to have it changing from both top down and from the ground up. Without that, you're going to have a lot of confusion. You're going to have a lot of different languages being spoken across your organization, and it's going to cause a lot of confusion and churn for everybody involved. This is what we were talking about when we talk about business outcomes. When we talk about path to agility, one of the things that we look at is, what are the outcomes you are trying to resolve? Are there certain areas of effect that you want to impact? So let's say your employee engagement is low. Do you want to try to figure out how to improve your employee engagement? Or is there other areas like you're having issues getting your code to production in a predictable way? So maybe you need to work on your productivity. But looking at these areas and only focusing on certain areas will help you identify and move the needle instead of trying to boil the ocean. So when we work with organizations, we look at these 9 dimensions of outcomes, and we have them pick maybe 2, and just say 2 or 3 and say, these are the areas we want to change, and these are the biggest opportunities we have for that organization. Doing that helps us keep them aligned to a smaller idea of what is going to change and only focus on that. By doing so, we can say, let's look at this, let's try to do some things in this area, and by that, we can measure that as well and see the difference as we move forward. That helps gain some confidence, and it helps get some patterns going on getting the change going. And from there, you're able to address other things as you get successes in certain areas. Communicate those out, and you start getting that buy-in to the change as well. So this really does help make sure that you're maximizing what you're getting out of the change by limiting the focus of what you're trying to change in the first place.
Absolutely. So I wanted to add something here pertaining to Michael's question as well. Like, have we seen the waterfall versus agile issue addressed successfully? How? This is the key point. Driving alignment across the business functions on what is it that we're trying to achieve. I've seen when that happens well, it isn't just a faster waterfall, it is truly agile. Versus when that doesn't happen, there is a lack of understanding on the business outcomes, truly all the way to business business leaders, I've seen what looks like agile, but it really is a faster waterfall because your business functions are still waterfall. I'll give you an example. I worked in with companies where there are restrictions, whether it's healthcare related, whether it is related to army, military, there are restrictions on how you can actually update the customer systems. How often can you do it? What is the process for it? So if IT or product drives that transformation without truly understanding those restrictions and just gets to, we just need faster cycle time. We just really need to deliver things faster over the air, continuous deployment. It doesn't do anything for the business because the customer really cannot upgrade without going through the entire process. So in that case, maybe just a faster delivery is not what the business is looking for. And in driving towards that isn't going to get the business most benefit versus maybe market responsiveness or customer satisfaction is a business outcome that the business cares about. So having, I know it's not easy to have those conversations and drive those conversations, but it is critical. Unless those conversations are happening at true leadership level between business functions and product and IT, that's when I have seen waterfall and agile truly merge and be successful. And sometimes it requires a completely new business function. Like I have seen that as well. Like there's so much inertia in old business functions that we just could not transform the old products to be that way. Versus when we came up with new product ideas, we're like, let's try this differently. Let's have different customer expectations set from scratch. That is when I've seen that be more successful. Just wanted to add some examples there.
Yeah, and also to address Michael's question, if you don't involve the entire organization, then you're going to end up with this waterfall versus agile kind of mindset. It's not really waterfall versus agile. It's more like old business way of working against this new way of working. So I saw Darcy put in a question about why is waterfall made a scapegoat. It's not really, we say waterfall all the time. It's really about the idea that there's old practices that the organization does, and they're trying to change to this new way of working. If they keep both, then you're going to have some conflict. You're definitely going to have conflict because they're operating in two different ways. What you need to do is make a good decision, make a good plan for how you're going to transition to that new way of working, and make sure you involve everybody, because without doing so, you're going to have that conflict. You're going to have that issue, those churn show up because you're not fully embracing it. You're only half embracing it. So you have to figure out how to get everybody on board to actually take on that whole transformation.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think that's a very good clarification. It's not really so much, even if you were using that word to answer the question, because Michael's question was phrased that way, it's not really waterfall versus agile. It's like old way of doing things, new way, whatever the delta is.
It's change. It's just change. And getting people to change fully is really, really hard. All right. So now another aspect of this is one thing that's great about Path to Agility is we saw the outcomes. The outcomes are also tied to Agile outcomes, which are also tied to Agile capabilities. So when you look at this slide here, this organization picked predictability as one of the outcomes they wanted to improve. So as you see from this mapping, you see the team, the system, and the org levels. There are different dimensions to predictability that each part of that organization needs to address to be able to improve the overall predictability of the organization, not just the teams. This is about the overall predictability of the entire organization or that program that you're working within. So if you want to improve predictability, you have to create visibility for the teams. You have to have a predictable delivery cadence for the teams. For your system level, you need to be able to forecast. You need to be able to reduce complexity so it's easier for the teams to do their jobs. And you need to have value delivery coordinated so that way it's not a chaotic delivering process to the teams. And then even your leadership part of the organization needs to be able to drive the ability to focus. So that way, not only is it the teams have the ability to focus, but everybody knows the direction you're moving in because you have a focus. And that way you're all aiming in the same direction. This is a great way to be able to sort of dig into the problems that an organization has and peel away that onion to find out what is the root cause, what are the root issues that the organization is facing, and how do you actually address those? Because this will help you be able to drive towards that and pinpoint, hey, these are the things that this organization wants to really address.
Absolutely. So the change management piece again, right? I want to, Rajashri has also asked, what are the percentages in these slides? So just for context, these are screenshots from our tool called Path to Agility Navigator that we use for assessing and helping with continuous improvement and agile transformations. Whether we use these tools because in screenshots because they're easy for us to communicate and easy for us to use. We also want to focus on the concepts behind it. Whether you use these tools or not, the concepts are the same. You need a framework to be able to communicate that. So for example, in this case, you're seeing a team level, a system level, which is a group of groups, and an org level, which could be your business unit, which could be your entire product level transformations and level assessments. What this slide is communicating is that it's not just a team level function. Yes, the framework allows for teams to assess over time. Are we maturing? Our practice is maturing, leading to the business outcomes that David was pointing out earlier. But the same conversation has to happen. The same evaluation has to happen at the system level, at the team of team levels, at the value stream level, at the org level, because there's a really big trickle down impact from the organization and the system towards the teams. And the percentages are coming from actual evaluations that companies have done. So this is an example of a company that has done the evaluation. So one specific company, without naming the names, this is what their data looks like as they were going through the transformation over time. Rajashri, that's the answer on the screenshot. But driving something like this, whether you use the tool, whatever you use, but having transparency in the system, I think people underestimate the role it plays in change management. As I said before, change management, you have to align on the why, the business outcome, what are you trying to achieve, show progress over time, over and over again, and actively listen. And transparency is a big part of it. It's not just leaders, organizations going, teams, we're going to evaluate you. What do you look like? This is your next benchmark and KPI to hit. No, the teams have to understand that the systems and the organizations above us are evolving as well. And how are they evolving? It's a two-way street. What are the things that they're doing that are on their end? Because otherwise teams can get really frustrated when they know there are things out of their control, but those are required to change for the transformation to be truly successful.
Yeah, and dig a little bit about these percentages, Jesse. Each one of these boxes actually has acceptance criteria associated to what this is and a description around it. So what this can do is, as we're going through a transformation and we're doing these assessments, if we're talking about complexity reduced, they're at 56%. So that means they've met about 56% of the acceptance criteria to make this actually fully realized. So what we're able to do, even from a team level perspective, each team can have their own separate measurements. We can do a roll up of that. So that way there's a roll up of all the teams, or we can look at them separately. And then we can also look at that, how the system is functioning and the org level or the leadership level is functioning. Each one of these, and also these arrows that you see show the impact that if like team empowerment will also impact agile leadership, it'll impact team ownership. So there's a pathway through this to understand where your next step might be in your transformation. Because if you can get team empowerment to 100%, then your ability to get team ownership and agile leadership higher is probably your next step. So it does really help you align on where to focus.
Absolutely. We do have I know we kind of went into the tool itself. We do have a QR code at the end. If you want to set up a demo for the tool, we'll be able to talk through that. The key takeaway here is whatever framework you have, whatever that is, whether you're using Path to Agility or not, it has to have these multiple levels and it has to have clarity and transparency within the framework across the all levels. It can't just be we're evaluating the teams.
Yep. Absolutely. So the next area, this is something that it's one of those soft things that you really need to talk about because organizations do not focus on this enough. Psychological safety, the ability for your individual contributors, your leaders, your managers, your VPs to be able to make mistakes, speak their opinions aloud, not feeling like they're going to be targeted for their opinions. All these things really have a big impact on how an organization moves forward. Leaders need to set the standard for this. If leaders can't make mistakes, then how do all their people under them feel? Like if they can't make a mistake, then their employees definitely don't feel like they can make a mistake. So this is really about leadership showing the rest of the organization it's okay to be a human and to make mistakes, learn from each other, and like Sumedha said before, they got to walk the walk, they got to talk the talk. So it's not just saying, yeah, we're going agile, but understanding what agile is. A lot of leaders are not on teams, so they don't understand the day-to-day aspects of what an agile team goes through, or even some of the vernacular. But they need to understand it and get into the role of being a servant leader for their organization. Without it, you're going to still have pockets of resistance to this because it's not being championed by somebody in the leadership position. This also helps help decentralize decision making. So if you're empowering your people and people feel safe, those decisions can be made where they need to be instead of being made by pushing those decisions up through your ranks to the top so that they can make the decisions. It helps set up, if you have psychological safety, you can set up feedback loops to make sure that there's a lot of feedback coming in from the people that are involved in this. Understanding how people feel about your agile journey is going to be important to understanding what you need to address. Some of the threats from internally that can affect your ability to actually make this transformation successful is very important. So you need to be able to have those feedback loops to gather that information and make good assumptions on where to go next. So this is something that people touch on. It's not discussed enough, in my opinion, but psychological safety is something that organizations really need to pay attention to, because if they empower their teams, they're going to get a lot more out of them, and a lot more productivity, a lot more engagement, a lot more innovation.
Absolutely. And one thing I want to add here is from the other side of it. I worked in a company that drove psychological safety efforts and apps and software. And I can't tell you often leaders in theory understand that's what they want to do. But how do you teach somebody psychological safety? Like, you can show them videos, and that's what most of the trainings look like, unfortunately, is videos and trainings. And unless you have them experience it, they don't know what it is, so they can't offer it to somebody. So showing the same empathy and compassion to the leaders themselves, instead of just expecting somehow they're going to know, if they've risen in the ranks without ever expecting, understanding, receiving psychological safety, they don't know what it is. There's a learning model developed by Center of Learning Intelligence, 70% of human learning happens through experience, 20% through peer interaction, 10% through theory. By teaching them just the theory, they're actually only activating 10% of the brain. So even in our models, when we do organization level or system level assessments, we have facilitators really focus on creating a psychologically safe space for the leaders themselves so that they can experience it, so they understand how to offer it to others. David, would you agree?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's another question, or Jesse asked, who is the right person in the org to communicate the change? Usually it's not just one person. It's what we suggest is building a consortium of like-minded people who are empowered to make change. So if you have instead of having one person having to drive this, having a group of people who have a great understanding of what the issues are with the organization. They come from different parts of the organization, whether it's IT, business, HR, but they all participate as a group that helps drive the formation of your agile transformation and pushing it forward. And one of the big aspects of that is having a great communication plan. If you have that in place, so that way you can communicate the why, as Sumedha said, and the reasonings behind it, it really helps push forward the dynamic of drawing other people into the change, because you're making it open and honest, and you're not just changing it because someone up top above you said change. You're making it a communal change, and it makes it much more sticky, and it makes the opportunity for it to actually last a lot stronger too.
Absolutely. And last but not the least, the solution for a lot of the things, challenges that we talked about, is demonstrating business value and progress through metrics. Now, leaders, executives are trained to be metrics driven. That's their job. They have to focus on P&L. They over time get really good at it. And even though I know a lot of people get frustrated that Agile and continuous improvements are such intangibles, right? These are things that you have to understand. They're subjective. Putting something tangible like metrics on the intangibles helps people, helps the leaders understand, see the progress over time, follow along the journey better. It's really not about whether this metric like went up or down. It's about understanding the journey, understanding what is going on. So there's various ways of putting measures. There's and I highly recommend, I think David would say the same thing, actually having a mix of qualitative and quantitative, objective and subjective things going on. So you can tell the entire story, because one thing can really blindside you otherwise. So for example, there are metrics you can get from your whatever tool, Jira, whatever tools you're using. Like we have a metric template library, whether it is a customer satisfaction score like NPS or DORA metrics or flow metrics. You can use some of these to objectively try to see what is going on with teams. Where is the flow getting stuck? How are we actually improving things over time? Your uptime, all of these things. Then there's subjective metrics. When you use a framework like Path to Agility or whatever framework you're using, you measure things in a consistent way over time. And then you can see, even if subjectively people feel things are improving, right? You can see that, and that in itself is a metric. That in itself tells a story. Then you can put the story behind that, combine that with the objective metrics. So communicating, and we see a lot of value from this, mostly because when leaders understand metrics and how this is impacting their business goals, they are more willing to give budgets. They are more willing to understand, oh, this is actually beneficial for the business. So speaking their language basically is a good solution to try to put the intangible on the intangible. David, would you like to add anything to this?
Yeah, and one thing also, Path Agility is framework agnostic, so it doesn't actually, it doesn't matter if you're using Scrum, Kanban, whatever you're using, it focuses on some metrics that are around the idea of like, how do the people feel about how things are going? So from a team level, you're talking about things like, are you actually, do you have time to do the things you need to do? Are you actually focused on, do you understand how your work ties to the strategic goals of the rest of the organization? So it does help measure in granular detail at this team level, so you can get into, are they doing the right things from whatever framework you're using? Do they actually, are they doing backlog refinement on a regular basis? Are they doing their daily sync on a regular basis? These are just simple baseline things that all teams should be doing. But if you're using the tool well, then you can actually measure this and see the change as you're pushing different aspects of that change forward. It just really helps be able to find that, especially like if you're working with lots of teams, you can really look at each team and see, hey, this team's struggling here. That's where we should focus on helping them improve. But this team over here is having different challenges. Let's talk about what they're doing, and we can actually define an improvement backlog for that team that's different from the other team. And so that way you can get really into the details of trying to improve the small things that give big boosts to moving the needle.
Absolutely. And let's go to the last slide here. We have 5 minutes left. So while we answer the remaining questions that we have in Q&A, please, again, feel free to post questions. And just so you all know, I know some of you had questions on the tool and we showed screenshots, but we didn't really have time to dive into the tool. You're welcome to schedule a demo for the tool itself, and if there are other questions that you have, we can definitely we have a lot of coaches, experts, we can follow through and help you with whatever questions you have. So this is a quick and easy link for you to be able to schedule some time with us. We'll keep this up while we answer the questions. So, David, do you want to take? I have thoughts on it, but I would love for you to hear your thoughts as well. How do you do an assessment that you actually need an agile transformation?
Rajarshi, I think you mean from that, how would you actually get an assessment done when you know you need a transformation? Or is this, are you talking about doing the transformation? I'm assuming that's what it is. So the idea is an assessment can be done at any time. Really, you can, if you just need to assess a team, you can do that. It depends on what type of assessment you need or what issues you think you're seeing. Need for a transformation event. Okay. Well, so one thing is the assessment helps you define what you need to do in your transformation, especially if you're doing a full assessment of the entire organization. You'll get an understanding of where are the possibilities of improvement at the team level, at the system level, and at the org level. And utilizing that information, you can help drive the change by promoting these kind of things, saying, hey, these are areas where we need to improve. You can help pull people into the change of that organization. You can get leaders that lean in, you can get champions. But by doing that, you're building a community that realizes that there's a change that is needed. And doing so, you can start getting that momentum moving towards actually getting the transformation going. But the tool actually helps you say, okay, this is our baseline. This is where we are. Now we can make decisions on how we want to move forward. So using the tool to be able to say, here's where we are in real time. Now we can look at, okay, what do we want to actually improve? Are we behind in the market? Are our employees unsatisfied? Are we putting a lot of code out that has defects in it? So you can look at the challenges you're having and then focus your transformation on those areas first, see the needle move, and then you can broaden your change across the organization as you move forward. So it does really help you focus your change instead of trying to just change everything.
Yeah, and I want to add to that so transformation in my mind is a change, but a bigger scale, right? So it's a group of changes that you're trying to make at different levels. So do you need that? Or Rajarshi, I'm interpreting your question as, or is it okay to just iteratively, small things can change? I think there is a subjective call and objective call. Subjective call is if you understand Agile, you understand the business outcomes that the business is looking for, and you see that and you're like, that hurdle, that is a big mountain to climb. We cannot achieve that business outcome without truly changing and transforming how things, how we change things. That is a conversation to have. That is a place where you start with, we can't achieve the business outcomes and we're doing things, and these are symptoms. We can't achieve the business outcomes and we've tried a few things and we still can't achieve the business outcomes. We know we're stuck in old ways of doing things, and you are knowledgeable enough to know, or you can bring in experts to know, like, yeah, we're stuck in old ways of doing things. And then the objective piece comes in. You use a tool like ours, or you use a framework like ours or something else where you do an objective assessment and you see at org level, at team level, at system level, yes, we're scoring low. It's not just this is the only piece we have to fix. Across the board, you're scoring low because you're not doing things the agile way, the new way, whatever you want to call it. So that is, I think, how you know that you need a transformation, which is a bigger scale change. And maybe we can take a minute to answer the last question, and then we're over time. So one more question that we can take is, how can you correlate these metrics to business outcomes? For example, the shorter lead time, does it actually lead to faster time to market? So I'll quickly answer that. At least in our framework, I don't know how other frameworks do it. In our framework, we have tried to connect each capability to an agile outcome and then to a business outcome. That's why we recommend tracking at different levels. You're tracking at the business outcome level and the metrics level. At the same time, you're tracking at the agile outcome level, and then you're tracking at the agile capability level. So you should be able to see an improvement at all different levels, and the mix of objective and subjective comes into play because you're trying. David, anything to add to that?
Yeah, there's also a tie-in because, again, you don't realize how things that you could be doing at the system and org level could have an impact on the teams. And by doing an assessment, especially from the way the Path Agility does it, you can actually see the tie-ins there. So you can see these teams are being impacted by these processes, decisions, old ways of working. And if those are a low score, then you can actually correlate directly to these other scores down at the team level that, hey, if we change this, we can improve the overall function of all the teams. So it really does give you a good tie-in there, so that way you can actually make better changes and more precise changes to actually affect the root cause that you're trying to get to.
Absolutely. Awesome. Thank you all for attending and asking all the questions and engaging with us. Again, feel free to reach out to us. We would love to chat. If you have questions about the tool, any other questions that we were not able to answer today, any follow-ups, we would love to hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you all.